Say Network podcast. I'm Megan Villalpando, and I'm here with Jim Sparks.
Hello.
And Abraham Tavera.
Hola.
And a few weeks ago, we did a podcast. Hopefully you can go back and listen to it if you didn't already. It was called The Encouragers, and we had special guests, Captain Caroline Rowe and Major Regina Scholl, on there with us. And they talked about the importance of being intentional and spending time with the Lord, with the purpose of that to receive encouragement and endurance in this season. Particularly, we were talking about the COVID season. And something that really stuck out to me was when Captain Caroline Rowe, she did a prayer at the end. No spoilers, but she did pray at the end. And she prayed that we would have the discipline to spend time with the Lord. And that specifically really stuck out to me, probably because it convicted me a little bit. But that episode ended up being one of our most popular, so I thought it would be really cool to do a follow-up to further explore what spending time with the Lord can look like on a daily basis. And for anyone who might not be familiar, another kind of more formal term for this is a spiritual discipline. So if you hear us talking about spiritual discipline, we're talking about spending time with the Lord intentionally. So to help us talk through spiritual disciplines in more detail, we have Captain Harryette O'Brien with us. Captain Harryette, welcome.
Thank you.
What up?
Captain Harryette and her husband Sean are the Corps officers of the Torrance Corps in the Cal South Division. And Captain Harryette has been working her way through a book called Silencio, I hope I'm saying this right, Reflective Practices for Nurturing Your Soul. And Captain, how long have you been kind of going through this book?
I've been going through it for 23 months. No, 23 weeks. Sorry.
Wow.
Feels like months. 23 weeks. I do one spiritual discipline a week, but one of them I had to do twice because I wasn't very disciplined. So I've been doing it for 23 weeks.
Awesome. Well, we're going to talk more with Captain Harryette about what her experiences has been like going through these spiritual practices. But before we get into that conversation, we want to just take a quick minute and talk about a youth culture resource with you. So, Abraham, what do you have?
Oh, as we all know, depending on when you hear this, we've just gone through an election. As of right now.
Wait, depending on when you heard it, we're recording it 2 days after the election. So everyone would have gone through the election.
Depending on when you're hearing this, I'm not sure who your president is right now in the future person. I don't know who your president is. So we're trying to figure that out right now.
Too.
Who the president is. But I pulled up this article that was pretty interesting because I think this is something relevant to youth. Is how do you talk to your kids about the election? And I will link this article in the show notes. But that got me thinking, how do you guys, I think those of you who have children, how did you communicate that? Did you talk to your kids about the election? I mean, did they hear about it? Did they care? Like, what was sort of like your conversation with them on it?
Okay, well, yes, we did talk about election in my house, but growing up, we didn't talk about politics at all. Like it just never, ever once came up. And like if it did come up, like during like election times, we didn't talk about it. I have no idea who my dad voted for ever, never, not once. I don't know at all. And my mom wasn't allowed to vote until we were teenagers, and that's when she became a citizen. And so the only thing that we ever really talked about politics-wise was laughing at a moment where my dad had worked a lot of hours and was really tired and kind of grumpy, and a guy came to our door to talk about voting on some proposition or some candidate or something.
Yeah.
And was talking to my mom, and my dad walked by. He's like, "Why are you talking to her? She's a communist." To the guy, and the guy was like, "What?" And my mom was angry and stuff like that. She's from Canada. She's not a communist. I don't know. It was just him being funny and grumpy at the same time. But so we didn't talk about it, and I kind of don't really know where my siblings stand on politics still occasionally. So my sister ended up getting a job in Washington, D.C., and she worked on Capitol Hill. And so when she did, we talked a little bit about it, but it was still in broad terms.
Right.
So my wife's family was very similar. They didn't talk about it a lot, though I think she knew more where her parents stood than I did. But they still not a lot of talk about it. So we don't talk about it because it just wasn't a thing. But we want to, it's in the news. And so I flipped on one of the first debate I turned on, and because my oldest son, who's in high school now, was like, "Hey, Dad, is that debate on?" I'm like, "Yeah, let's flip it on." And so I turned it on, and both my wife and I didn't say anything. We just allowed them to watch it, and they were as confused as we were of what was going on, and allowing them to kind of make up their own mind of what they think about things. And then on the election night, we had I didn't really want to turn it on at all, but they brought it up, so I turned it on. I go, "We'll watch it just for about a half hour." I go, "No decision is going to be made anyways." But that way they could see all that stuff. And to them, it was like a competition. Like you could see that they were rooting for people. Strangely, they knew. Yeah. And it wasn't just presidential stuff. But so it gets talked about somewhere. But for us, the response for like the debate is like, "Well, what did you think about that?" Like we just wanted to hear what they had to say. And we weren't guiding them in any way or shape or form, and allowing them to process it and stuff. And they don't see it as sides. At least my kids right now don't see it as sides. They're pretty young. It's just these people are trying to run for president. And so because of that, they just see more behavioral stuff. That's the stuff that they wanted to talk about more, is more of the, how each other were responding to things. And so that's kind of how we went with it, that my kids don't know who I voted for, and they don't know who my wife voted for.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a good way of doing it, but it was peaceful in our house growing up when it comes to politics. And so, but you
guys didn't have a house divided where like half of you were wearing Trump jerseys and the other half were wearing Biden jerseys?
Nope, none of that. And my wife, and to be honest, I don't know who my wife voted for. Really, I have an idea, but I don't know that for sure.
I kept trying to get it out of my wife, but she kept telling me Kanye. I was like, all right.
So that, I don't know. We kind of take that stance on a lot of things with parenting. We're showing them in kind of a very neutral way, allowing them to process it themselves. And if they want to discuss further, we're always willing to discuss further and process it. But it's like, I don't know. It's like even when we're watching a movie that we think is totally fine, and because we remembered it as a kid, and then you're watching, you're like, "Oh, there's some complex storylines in here." And so we'll say, "Hey, what did you guys think about that?" And then kind of do a debrief of it, just kind of get their feel. But I don't know. I don't want my kids to be able to kind of sort it out themselves and study for themselves and have their own opinions. It scares me if they have just my opinions, because I'm not always right, and not on the right side of things always, and I'm learning myself. So I don't know. That's the approach that we took. I'm not saying I would advocate for that. I don't know if that's the right way, but it worked for my family, and so it's kind of the play we're doing. What about you, Harry?
We have talked with our kids a little bit about it. They know who we voted for, and we kind of told them why a little bit. But they also pick up things in their class, so they tell us things. Sure. And they're not necessarily on either side, but they don't like the commercials where another one bashes another one. My daughter thinks that's completely unjust and unkind and unnecessary. But a lot of the things we did this year during the whole election time is the different propositions for California, because those commercials came on every 3.5 seconds.
Yeah.
So many commercials.
Well, that is, you bring up a point. So like in California, we don't get near the commercials that other states get, because California is usually votes a Democratic way. So like there's not a lot of spending on the big races because those are kind of a wash. They spend more in Arizona. You would have saw a lot more in Arizona than we would have seen in California.
Interesting.
But they do spend a lot on the props. There were
Yeah.
so
We
many
kind of feel a little
commercials.
unloved over here in California.
Wow. California is its own beast. But yeah, so we talked about those different propositions and what they mean. And at first, my kids were really confused why one commercial would say vote yes on a prop and then another commercial would say vote no. And so they're like, this is a confusing message. And I was like, so they pay for that. And so we kind of explained that to them. And we turned on the debates. And my daughter was interested for about maybe 32 seconds. And then she went to do coloring stuff. And my son watched and asked some questions and stuff. He's 10. So we talked a little bit. And then I had it on election night. But they were playing their electronics. So they were in it. But they still wanted to know who won, who's ahead, or why do they count it this way, and why do they do things that way. So we got to talk to them a little bit. But growing up in my house, I knew exactly where my parents stood and who they were going to vote for and all the things and all that.
Yeah, I did have a lengthy civics lesson on the Electoral College because that's confusing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Particularly to kids. And
Oh, yes,
so-
I had to explain that too. Why do they only have a small number when there's a lot of numbers? And then I was like, hold on, let me Google it real quick.
I
How
explained
much
it
is
this way.
tuition?
I was like, when we ask you guys what to do and all three of you agree that you want to go and do something, but mom and I agree to do something else, and we always end up doing that else, that's because we carry more votes because we're bigger.
Yeah.
And you carry less votes because you're smaller.
Yeah.
You might have a majority. That's cool. But we're bigger. So we get
I think that's kind of the probably the
whole
best
thing.
explanation
I was
I've
going to
heard
say,
of
that
it.
is literally the best explanation I've
and
ever heard of that.
It kind of worked. They kind of understood that. And so I said, when you get bigger, then you'll carry a little bit more votes.
More votes.
I noticed a lot of people, maybe more so this election than past, that I've noticed took their kids with them to go drop off their vote or to
Yeah.
go and vote. Is that something that you guys did?
I did that with Brielle the last election. We actually went into the thing, and at that time she wasn't doing homeschooling that time, but we were already teaching her about civics and about the government. She could name off all the branches and all that stuff.
Dang, I'll send you my kids when we're done with that.
Yeah, we wanted her to understand it. I wanted her to know these things because a part of me is just like, I know she's going to get tested in it in school. I don't know if it was for the purpose of being super, into politics, but yeah, we took her during the last election. I wanted to kind of see it because I went when I was a kid, and my parents took me. We were kind of we talked about it in the 90s. Though there was sort of this like, politicians and lawyers are like the worst things in the world. There was sort of this thing where
Well, they were the part of the jokes for every stand-up.
every joke, yeah, it was like politicians, lawyers, and then occasionally Christians. The 90s, right? Those were the jokes. But what all of a sudden I do know that there's sort of this different view of politicians now. People see them as either saviors or the devil. They're no longer all the devil, And I do find that interesting. I think I kind of feel the need to do like what you're saying, where you explain the pros and like why are there people for and why are there people against. I think that's very good. I feel sort of the need to tell my kids that this is what it is. It's two sides trying to convince you. It's not one side is automatically bad and one side is automatically good. And they're both going to use tactics to try to convince you that are not always good or not always wrong. So I feel like I feel sort of the need to explain the blueprint of politics in the United States and the way it works, not necessarily what side to take. Because I think that if you could see things that way, you won't get caught up too much in the passion of it and the anger and the sort of heavy talking that people do on both sides, So I try to kind of give them a level-headed view of it. At least I try my best. I'm not saying that like I have a perfectly level-headed view because I do get kind of like worked up as well. But I also need to be aware that I am probably getting unnecessarily worked up about things too. So at least that's why I do feel the need. It is important to teach kids about politics in that sense to help them understand that, you're kind of in a way being used, to get people into positions. And so when you're aware of that, I think it helps people process it a little differently, maybe, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. My kids, I don't know, they went with us to drop off the vote, but that's just because they were in the car with us. Like it was intentional. But one of my kids is far more interested in doing taxes. Honestly. Awesome. Yeah. When tax time comes around, he's like, hey, are we doing taxes or what?
Future accountant.
I hope so. Gosh. But they're more interested in that kind of stuff. The thing is with like voting, particularly now, because like I'm not going into a booth ever again. I will vote in the mail.
Yeah.
And
I filled it out while I was at my coffee table.
Yeah,
and my kids saw it.
Wait, didn't you have like a really long wait?
I did in March when we had the primaries.
How long was your wait?
2 hours.
Oh, God.
And so that was it. I was like, nope, never doing that ever again, ever in the history of again. So yeah, it's different. It's, I can remember watching my dad vote in my neighbor's garage and just seeing my dad's legs behind a curtain. I was like, is he going to the bathroom? He's peeing in Chip's lawnmower. But did you just look at him to cut that out?
No, I'm leaving. That's totally it.
Harry just gave you a look of like, dang, I might want to cut that one.
You like that? Mm-mm.
No, we push the envelope here. We don't mess around.
I prefer the self-adhesive envelopes.
So some self-adhesive envelopes have gluten in it.
What?
Oh, no.
Might want to let Sean know that. I don't lick envelopes. I haven't licked an envelop in 12 years.
Well,
And-
licking
You're
envelopes
missing out.
is gross. No, you got to use a glue stick. Ew.
Yeah.
Always the glue stick.
Yeah, ew, don't
I
put your
use a
tongue on
sponge.
that. No, you're going to get some weird, strange disease. Don't lick that
Use a
envelope.
sponge. Now we're getting into the Halloween drug candy stuff.
Which was alive and well when I was a child.
No, it comes up every year. This year it came up where someone left their opioids, and stuff like that. And I'm like, no druggie does that. They know exactly where those are.
No,
they're not losing them.
accidentally leaving anything anywhere.
I just bypassed and gave out syringes.
We gave out chores this year.
Nice.
Yep. So the trick-or-treaters could come and like use the leaf blower for 15 minutes.
Yeah, that's my treat.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Well, we talk about a spectrum of topics on this podcast. So, from needles and syringes to spiritual disciplines.
There you go.
Let's talk about it.
There's your copy right there.
So yeah, we do want to talk a little bit about spiritual disciplines. Just going back to Captain Harryette, the book that you're reading. Can you, first off, just give us some insight on how did you get into this book and what kind of spiritual disciplines or reflective practices have you done so far?
Okay, well, I was on social media and Major Nancy Helms posted that she got this book, and I love books. I love to read. I love to study the Bible and history and different ways of doing things, and I thought it was really interesting. And I think growing up in the church or in the Salvation Army, I wasn't familiar with the term spiritual discipline. I was like, oh, what's that? Right? Like, what am I not doing? But then after reading it, I'm like, oh, I'm doing that. Okay. And then there are a few of them where I'm like, oh, what is that? And they've been really interesting. But that's how I found it. And I bought it. And I decided that I was going to do one spiritual discipline a week. And then Sunday would be like my wrap-up day, and I start again on Monday. And some of the spiritual disciplines that I've been doing so far are like journaling, confession. That was kind of hard. So in the book, it gives you a little outline of what the spiritual discipline is and maybe a story or an illustration. And it comes with like a scripture and a quote and then also a hymn to add to it. But it gives you like reflection questions and then also the practices, different things that you can do throughout your time that reflect what this is. And one of the practices was find a friend, a confidant, and confess your sins to them. And I'm like, oh, sweet Jesus.
Wow.
So I did. But these kind of things that they help you keep you accountable, and like praying scripture, I did a gratitude, being more aware of things around you and listing things that you're grateful for. There's one about reordering your loves, and it's kind of switching your priorities. And
How did that affect Sean?
well, he stayed pretty high, but
Okay.
He wasn't complaining.
Yeah.
At least not to me. Maybe ask his friends. But those are some of the ones that I've done so far, and I love them.
That's cool. Yeah, I think I'm with you. When I think of the word spiritual discipline, I think of something that people in like monasteries do. Like,
Yeah, can we give it another name?
yeah,
I know,
Really,
because
the
nobody likes the
discipline
word
part.
discipline.
Yeah.
But I realized as I've gone through it that it is a discipline because I have to make myself do something every day. And so on Monday, I read through what it is, and then I look at the practices, and I see, okay, where can I do this? When can I not? And one of the practices was on gratitude and humility, and it was doing something without seeking approval or, oh, how'd I do on this or something like that.
I'm out.
I know, and I'm a 9 on the Enneagram, so I want to make everybody happy and all be singing Kumbaya together. And so this was really hard when I had to do something and be like, okay, did I do okay? Was it okay? Because I had it on my sermon, so I preached my sermon, and it's getting recorded these days, so I gave it to Sean, and I was like, but don't give me any feedback. And or in different things with my friends. Okay, this is an article I wrote. I recently started writing, and I wrote it and I gave it to people. I'm like, just read it, but don't give me any feedback today. And that was really hard for me.
Oh, I don't know about that, man.
I know. I think I'd have a hard time with that too.
I need approval.
Right, but you don't see.
But I do.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, I don't know. Like I say, I didn't really, when I thought of the word spiritual discipline, it was kind of like I say, I would think of like monks in monasteries and stuff out there just living a life of solitude and not talking to people for days on end.
Which
Doesn't sound terrible.
I was gonna say there's appeal to that for me.
Oh, for sure. And some of these monasteries are in some of the most beautiful places in the world. It'd be pretty cool.
I wouldn't go with orange though, with my clothing.
Oh, yeah, it's not good for a skin tone.
No,
I'm with you.
I'm more of a navy guy, but
Skin tone.
Black is thinning, so I'm here for that.
Yeah, we could do the black. But yeah, I guess I just didn't really take it too seriously or formally until I got a little bit older. And I've actually, I'm not super, we'll talk about what spiritual disciplines we're good at and which ones are easier and harder and stuff in a minute. But first, I just want to talk about, what do you guys think is the value of spiritual disciplines? Because for me, I think that the older I get, the more into this adult journey that I get into, the more spiritual disciplines I think really, I fall back on those a lot when I'm going through a hard time, when I'm going through something in my life that's maybe scary or difficult or just challenging. I tend to fall back on those spiritual disciplines of prayer and being in the Word and Scripture and all that kind of stuff. And so I didn't really necessarily see the value of spiritual disciplines as strongly until I was going through difficult times in my life. And so for me, that's kind of where the value has been. But I'm wondering for you guys, what do you think is the value of practicing some of these spiritual disciplines that Harriette's named off?
Well, I think the value for me that I recognized right away is that it offers different perspectives and different ideas. A lot of times the spiritual disciplines we can name right off are praying, reading the Bible, and maybe meditating. But there's so many more that we wouldn't even think about are spiritual disciplines. And I don't know who made up this list in the book, but they offer a new perspective of deepening your relationship, because a lot of the times I can get stuck in the same routine of things. And then it just becomes a routine, and it's not something from my heart. It's just, I have to pray because I pray. I write in my prayer journal because that's what I'm supposed to do. And I'm supposed to study my Bible every day because that's what a good Christian does. And it becomes more as an obligation than as an expression of my heart. And spiritual disciplines provide different ways and offer different perspectives of how you can deepen that relationship with Jesus. So they help you shake things up a little bit.
yeah, I think that's important. I think when you're working or in ministry full time and doing it full time, I think it's easy, very, very, very easy to become undisciplined it sounds weird if you're giving sermons and teachings and stuff, but I think it's super easy to be on cruise control and just pull from the same things and just keep doing it. And it becomes almost performance type thing, whether it be you're teaching or doing something on a smaller scale. It's just more performance and a checkbox, like you were saying. And if you are not actively involved in a discipleship group or discipleship mentoring or anything like that, so you're missing like these regular things that are helping you to go deeper. We always hear feedback. We want to go deeper. We always ask what that is. But I think personally, we know that our relationship needs to continue to grow and grow and grow. And I think without some sort of discipline and practicing disciplines, we could easily get on autopilot and just go. I mean, I could tell you, I went to church for years without really caring. I just was at church. I'm not sure it did anything deeper for my relationship with Christ. I was just there because I had to be there. And it's just what you did. And so that's scary because you can mask deeper issues real quickly with all of that.
On that note of autopilot, I think when you're in full-time ministry, sometimes it's easy to just know that, well, I have to study the Bible to give this lesson, or I have to study this so that I can teach this. And it's easy to substitute that for actual spiritual discipline and actually spending time and building your relationship with the Lord. It's not that you're not receiving from that and being with the Lord in that, but sometimes it's easy to just default on that. Well, I don't need to do this. I don't need to I don't know, read my devotional today because later on I'm giving a devotional or something like that.
Yeah.
I also you're talking about how there's uncomfortableness very much involved in that. And I think I don't know, for me, it's I don't really want to get uncomfortable right now. I feel pretty good where I'm standing. Everything feels pretty good right now. And so I don't really want to do that. I don't have a need to get uncomfortable right now at all. But there's a need that you have to regularly. And, but I think it's just easier to be no, I'm good. It's like attending events. I've attended so many events in my life, and I'm not actually a giant fan of events. And, but I've attended physically so many events in my life, but mentally I haven't attended a lot of events where I've fully have taken in things because of that autopilot type stuff. And I think that's dangerous.
Yeah, I think for performance-driven folks like myself and Harryette, I feel that the discipline, spiritual discipline, helps to it's I don't know. It's like an athlete that doesn't work out. It's like all he does just goes and he plays, and when you do that, you risk injury, you risk all these other things because you're just thinking about the performance. You're not thinking about your own health. You're not thinking about your own spiritual health. And I think those spiritual disciplines are for your own just spiritual health and your spiritual well-being to keep you spiritually healthy. So that you could do those things. I think it's easy to stop doing them because, when you're praying, you were saying when you're preparing, you're reading the Bible, it's all for the performance. It's all for being on stage. And all of a sudden, all the stuff you're reading no longer applies to you. It's applying to the people that you're talking to. And you're no longer you're not being self-reflective anymore. You're just, thinking about how can I give more conviction, And so I think the disciplines and keeping those things in place, it lets you look in the mirror, lets you, have those times of reflections, lets you see the ugliness, lets you see the things that God wants to work on in your life and God wants to fix. Because it's so easy to forget that you have all these things as well. Even as pastors or ministers, we still have all these issues that, God wants to deal with in us, on a personal level. And we could easily just let that slide and no longer, train, no longer I just read that Russell Wilson spends $1 million on
his body.
So do I.
A year?
Yeah, and I thought this is kind of where I'm going with this. Is it makes me think that he's caring about his health because he's got to be at his top performance.
Yep.
when he's out there, in playing, but that's a discipline that has to take place daily, and it all pays to this performance as well, But imagine if he didn't do that, if all he did was just go out there and jump on the field, And I think that's what I don't know, I feel like there's a really close connection, I think, with the spiritual discipline and all that stuff that keeps you on the daily, keeps you ready and healthy. Yeah, man, I just saw a quote from the Pope where he said that a life without prayer is tedious. And I think that I definitely attest to that as well. When my prayer life starts to just fall by the wayside, I start feeling the stress levels go way up. The stress levels. I'm not talking to God anymore. Now I'm stressed out over everything. I'm not trying to, and I feel like the time I take to pray, I could take doing another task. So I'll just forego the prayer to get a task to perform, to do something. And all of a sudden things start feeling overwhelming and difficult and tedious. And so, yeah, I think the benefit of of a disciplined prayer, spiritual discipline is that definitely helps life feel less tedious,
Well, it definitely gives you that anchor or that foundation just to return to, like, just for all of life, because life is crazy. It's hard. Sometimes it's really good. Sometimes it's really hard. But having that foundation is so important.
It's been pretty easy lately. Pandemic.
Well, I think God created us to be in a relationship, right? A relationship with other people. He didn't create us to be alone. And one of those relationships he created us to be in is with himself.
Yeah.
And so this is how we keep up that relationship. This is how we nurture it. This is how we grow it. This is how we deepen it, right? And we wouldn't just leave things alone with our spouses or our friends or whatever. We do these tasks, and that's what spiritual disciplines are tasks to do to help us maintain this relationship with God.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but these aren't meant to be burdensome, right? Like as you're going through, like they're a discipline, but Harryette, I'm curious, like, has it felt like a burden to do these, or is it an obligation to do these?
No obligation, but some have felt burdensome because they're hard. So one of the spiritual disciplines that I find really challenging for me are like the silence and solitude ones, and like the sit and reflect, because I like to talk to God, and sometimes obviously I don't give him enough time to talk back. But we're like working from home every other day, and I've got 2 kids doing school from my house. And so the spiritual disciplines that encourage me and challenge me to go into my room and find 10 minutes of complete silence, I had to do that week twice because I was like, all right, God, you got 2 minutes. And then like a minute in, I'm like, oh, I can't do this anymore. I got to go. And so those are the hardest because I do find them to be challenging, but it's like a good challenge. Like when I like to run, and so it's a good, when it hurts, obviously not when you like need to fall over and have somebody pick you up on the side of the road, but like it's the good pain that you run through. It's like after the half marathon when your legs feel like jelly, but it's the good jelly because you've trained for this. You worked so hard for this. And so after sitting in silence for 10 minutes and like, maybe I heard something, maybe I felt something, maybe I didn't, but I know that I did that. I gave God that 10 minutes, and he wasn't asking for some crazy results. He was asking for that. And so I think they are a little burdensome, but they're meant to be to stretch us. It's not meant to be like, oh my gosh, I have to do this. Like I have to go to another Zoom meeting or another event or another something like that. But it's meant to stretch us so we'll be open to another perspective and another opportunity of communing with him.
Yeah, I think it reminds me of Service Corps a little bit. Everybody comes in at the beginning of the summer and they're like, oh, I just want to grow. I want to be stretched. I'm like, do you?
And then after a week, you email Jim to have you come home. Right. Oh, nobody else? That's me. Cool. Okay.
But it's hard, that process.
I had you guys do a stretch. We went for a hike.
Oh, gosh. Mm-hmm.
It was a stretch for some, and some maybe needed medical attention, whatever.
Vans picked people up because we were dying on the side of the road. But that's for another podcast.
That'll be a separate episode.
A perceived 3-mile hike turned into maybe 11-mile. I mean, I had a little calculation error.
That's pretty long. I I think I'm with you. Like, I struggle with the silence and solitude. Just to initially, like, quiet my mind. Like, even just to quiet my mind, it takes me a while for it to just kind of, like, focus, because it's just constantly, like, thinking about so many things. But I think one that's even harder for me is fasting. Oh, my gosh.
Oh, yeah.
I am terrible at fasting. I have tried, and I am just terrible at it. My body does not react well to it, per se. But are there any spiritual disciplines that you guys find especially difficult?
I think reading the Word, like regularly, daily, and stuff is a challenge. In some cases, I'm like, I already know where this is going, and so I'm good. I'm done. Or just I'll get to it, and then just keep putting it off. That's very difficult for me. Very difficult. I'd rather listen to it, to be honest. But even then, I'm like, well, all right, I've heard enough. So that's a struggle. That takes a lot of like hyper focus and discipline on my part.
I think during this pandemic, Sunday service, man, just like doing it, just like watching a service, it's been tough, man. That's been hard. The first few weeks it was cool, but then after a while, it's just like, all right, I kind of miss buildings, and so just finding that time to I didn't realize it'd be that difficult, It was something I took for granted, going to church on Sundays and all that stuff. So just finding that moment to receive, like I would on Sunday, I sit in church, I would fellowship. What are the things we do is like fellowshipping with unbelievers or with unbelievable believers, and listening to the word and worshiping. Those three things were all packaged in on Sunday for me. And then during the week, I do some Bible reading and prayer and all that stuff. But those three things have been a lot harder now. And it's not that they're not available. Like, if anything, sermons have been more available than ever, And it's not that is calling somebody up in fellowship with it. It's hard, but it's still available, It's just, like, it's like when you lose like to go back to the athlete like analogy, it's like when you lose your gym membership, It's like you look at your house and you don't have anything, to work out with, to do those things, you just have to find a way to do it, but you can do it, But yeah, that one has been difficult for me, and there's been some Sundays where I'm just like, oh, I didn't go to church today, I didn't like listen, I didn't watch the service or do anything, and so I was like, oh, and then I was like, well, I got to do it now, but then it's starting to feel kind of like, I got to do it on whatever, So yeah, that's been something that has been a lot more difficult. I can listen to like a sermon, but yeah, like I can find something, but yeah, it's been a lot more difficult. Prayer, I've been doing a lot of praying now, because when things get tough, it turns like the prayer life tends to go up a little bit higher, But yeah, it's that one's been a tough one.
I think one of the lessons I've learned through all of this about the hard ones is that it's not, and I can be like a perfectionist or a task-oriented person. So I want to make sure that I did this and I did it well, right? Like, God, you saw that I answered all the questions and did the tasks, right? But it's not about that. It's about my heart, and did I try? So did I fast when I was supposed to? Well, I ate the fruit snack, right? Like, is God mad or upset, or did I fail at that? No, because I'm just trying to constantly grow. Did I do everything 100% every day? Maybe not, but I tried, and I took that step into build a relationship in a different way. And I think that's what matters most, is that I've tried.
Yeah. Kind of on the opposite end of that, the flip side of that, I used to, I did this thing a couple years ago. I felt really convicted where I'm at WYI, or I'm at different events, youth councils, whatever, and I'm teaching like, Bible lessons, or I'm teaching things, I'm teaching the word. And I realized, I was like, I haven't read through the entire Bible. And I was kind of like really convicted a couple years ago about that. And so I went on this thing where I decided to read the entire Bible in a year. Took me a year and a half, but I still did it. I tried.
Good job.
And I succeeded in the end. But then now I'm doing a thing where I'm trying to read it again through in a different version. I'm trying to go through it in the Message version. And at first it was really hard to stay disciplined, because I really had to carve out time to like get through it and stuff. And particularly when you start from the beginning, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, you're good. But once you get into Leviticus, it gets a little bit more challenging. But
Numbers is exciting.
it's true.
Yeah.
I love
There's
those
some good.
books.
There's some good stuff in there. But as I was going through, it started to become easier for me. As I started to practice it more, it became easier. And now that I'm going through it a second time, it just comes naturally to me. Like I just know at this time, I got to go read my chapter. And I've just become more disciplined in that. And it didn't always come easy to me, but it was something I had to work towards. When I think of spiritual disciplines, and when you think of spiritual disciplines, are there any that come easier to you? We talked about challenging ones, but are there any that come easier, or maybe some that you've had to work at, and maybe they didn't always come easy, but now they come a little bit easier to you?
I like studying the Bible. I like reading. That's something I really like. I like it because I love the stories. I love the deep meanings you can go into forever. Those kinds of things that I'm down with, and those are, I can find myself doing those a lot easier.
I love to study the Bible. So for about a year and a half now, I've been doing Bible studies. I primarily do them from a company called the Daily Grace Co. They've got great studies for men and women. I know. I think the difference is the pictures are more manly, but I don't know. I don't know how.
Now you got me curious.
I know. See, now you can go look on. But I do that every day. I do one every day, and I love to study the Bible. But I also really love the spiritual disciplines that focus on gratitude and making sure to be aware of my surroundings, which I'm never aware of my surroundings, but to thank God for all the things, for the little things and the big things. I'm constantly in a conversation with God all day saying, thank you for this, thank you for that, or I think that's a good thing, but I'm not ready to say thank you for that yet, or something like that. So I really tend to focus on making sure to thank him for the things and be aware of how he's worked every day in my life and the life of other people.
I don't know if I am good at these things, but I've gotten much better at giving thanks and just being grateful for opportunities. And I think with that came a new thing in my life called empathy, which is really fascinating. If you guys should check this empathy thing out, because it changes relationships. Let me tell you. But the other one too that I've gotten, I think I accidentally stumbled into it, but it's more conscious of a more simple life, less extra things, less a bunch of things. And I think it got even more magnified through this time. I love the quietness. I love being still. I go for walks by myself now regularly. And just a more simple approach and not being so bogged down. And I Megan, you were talking about like sitting down and your mind's going 100 miles an hour. As I've gotten my life more simple, even just like going into the garage and getting rid of stuff that I just don't need anymore. Just getting rid of a lot of stuff. I used to be like that. I used to not being able to turn things off. And now I could go to bed at 9:30, no problem. Like I feel far more relaxed. I feel better about things. Less cluttery and stuff. So that I think I've gotten better. I don't think I'm good at it by any means. But I have gotten better and has seen a difference just in my life on things. It's easier. Mm-hmm. It's less complicated.
Do you think going to bed earlier is due to COVID or due to age?
It's possible.
Yes.
Because I've been going to bed earlier myself too.
It's possible both. I put it this way. I've never had a problem sleeping, even in the most stressful of times in my life. Although strangely, I have been waking up a little bit more through the night, but I'm sure that's for medical reasons. But I have a therapeutic pillow now. My birthday came up, guys, and everything that I got was almost medical related. So I feel pretty good about getting older. But
did you get a dog?
No, the seeing eye dog will probably never come. A comfort companion may.
Oh, damn.
No, my kids want a dog. But no, I think my life just slowing down and being less conflict in my life too has made it a lot easier. There's less I'm not gonna jump into it. So arguments that I used to jump in and do battle with, I've like, that's not helping me out anymore. It's not doing any good, and I think that's made a big difference. And I think that's what's increased my capacity to care in other areas, because I'm less it's less about me and more about other things. And so I think it's been for the better ultimately.
So talking about the season of COVID, do you guys feel like spiritual disciplines have helped you through this season in any way?
Yeah, I mean, they've helped me. They've given me something to do, and they've given me different perspectives and offered new exercises on things to do and being able to see things differently. So, yeah, they've helped me to just cope with things and understand them.
I would say yes, but not intentionally, like not on purpose. I think like if I'm looking back, I'm like, oh, well, yeah, actually it has, but not like I've sat down and be like, all right, now it's game on. You know what I mean? But yeah.
Yeah, I feel like they've helped. I feel like they've, like she was saying, give you something to do. COVID has also allowed me to gauge my spiritual disciplines, to see where they were, and because a lot of time was taken from other things, and so I was like, oh wow, I'm lacking in these areas, and so I tried to build up habits and new kinds of spiritual disciplines during this time. So it's been helpful.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. Well, before we close out the episode, we always like to give our guests a chance to address you guys, our listeners, directly. So Captain Harryette, if you could leave a direct message in the inbox of each of our listeners, what would you like to tell them? You've got 2 minutes.
Well, regarding spiritual disciplines and how they can be kind of hard, and maybe they encourage us to kind of confront stuff that we don't want to. I've been studying the book of Hosea with my core family, and Hosea 2:14 says, "Therefore I am now going to allure her. I will lead her into the wilderness and speak tenderly to her." And this is God talking about the people of Israel and how he would redeem them. And one of my commentaries mentioned that sometimes we put the desert as a place of isolation and sadness and struggle, right? But in here, sometimes God just has to take us to a place, a quiet place, maybe it's the desert or the wilderness, to speak a message that we can most hear for us. And here Jesus says, I'm going to allure her. I'm going to win the people of Israel back. And so I kind of put myself in that instance, and you too can put yourself in. Jesus wants to take you into the wilderness to speak tenderly to you. And he does that through spiritual disciplines.
Definitely. I love that.
Amen.
All right. Well, Captain Harryette, thank you so much for joining us and for being here. We do appreciate it. If you are listening and you have questions, or maybe you need some advice on how to approach spiritual disciplines, or maybe you want to get better at being disciplined and spending time with God consistently, we encourage you to reach out. You can send us a message on social media at Say Network, or you can email us at sayconnect@gmail.com. You can also reach out to Captain Harryette on social media, and anything we've talked about in this episode will be linked in the show notes. We will link the book as well, the Silencio book, if you are interested in picking that up.
That's Spanish for silence. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
I just wanted to clarify that for
clarifying.
the listener.
And yeah, so check out the show notes. We'll have a link to that book. And also don't forget to subscribe to the Say Network podcast on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube for updates on new episodes. Thanks, you guys, for listening, and we'll be back next week with a brand new episode. We'll see you guys next time.